I know there are only 2 chapters out, but I'm already a pretty big fan of Jodio, because he's a menace, and it definitely seems like he has the potential to be one of the more interesting protagonists in the series. Jolene, Johnny, and Gappy are the best written, in my opinion. I know, gross opinions. And even though it's way too early to tell if Jodio will be able to stand next to them by the time the JoJo Lands ends, he does make one hell of a first impression, and I could see him at least becoming a favorite of mine. Part 9 is the story of how Jodio Joestar gets rich. He's telling it and is completely aware that he's the main character. He talks so much shit that when I first read the chapter, I felt like I was just getting flexed on for 50 pages. I honestly got flashbacks of being a kid watching that one commercial. You know, the one with that guy who's like, "You broke as hell, you got no job, you get no."
You're sitting on the couch, you're watching TV, and your life is passing you by.
So what do we know about Jodio so far? He's the Steel Ball Run universe's Giorno. You can tell by the heart and wings on his outfit, and also the fact that he was already involved in gang activity at 15 years old. However, as counterparts, these two have some pretty big differences. Giorno wants to become the Don of Passione so that he can use his power to protect the weak like they had in the past, rather than exploit and victimize them like they are under Diavolo's leadership. One of the things that he wants to do is stop people from selling drugs to kids, and even though he will probably ignore all sorts of other crimes, at least that is admirable. Meanwhile, Jodio is selling hard drugs to the students at his high school. He only has an interest in protecting his immediate family, and when he does talk to the reader about a guy he sees as weak, it isn't because he feels bad for him, it's so he can tell us how much cooler he is. I mean, you see the chain. Is he lying? Speaking of his family though, he has a mom, Barbara Ann, and an older sibling, Dragona. But his dad is currently at the store getting milk, and we don't know how long he's been gone or who he is. I saw a few people theorizing that he's a descendant of Diego Brando somehow. There's nothing saying he didn't have a kid before he got smoked, so who knows. Maybe we'll find out eventually, in like 5 years. I personally like this idea because it would give a more tangible reason for his name to be a combination of Jojo and Dio. Obviously, it's a nod to the core premise of the series, and Araki just thinking it sounded cool is honestly good enough. But this is most likely the final part, so it would be dope if there was just a little bit more significance behind it. When we're first introduced to Jodio, he's just chilling, eating breakfast, while his older sibling gets pulled over by the police. Even though most people would be nervous in this situation, especially considering what they have in the back of their truck, he plays it cool. Right up until one of the cops starts taking things too far with Dragona. Then he hops out and proceeds to wreck the police officers with his stand November Rain, which looks sick by the way. For right now, the only ability it has seems to be extremely heavy raindrops. We'll know for sure exactly what it's capable of when it's explained later on though. Anyway, while the cops are down, this man goes right up to the handsy one, jumps high in the air, and stomps his ass with both feet like he was Bruce Lee in Enter the Dragon. It's pretty normal for the Joestars to start off their story being caught up in a shitty situation like this. Joseph beats up some racist cops, Jolene gets framed for a hit and run, and Gappy wakes up butt naked with 4 balls and no memories. But Jodio almost kills 2 cops, sets their car on fire to get rid of the dashcam footage, and then smuggles hard drugs all within the first half of chapter 1. Apparently, selling drugs is the only reason he goes to school too. It's all a part of what he calls his... Jodio is still clearly a kid. His mechanism speech reads exactly like what you would expect from a 15-year-old who watches a lot of mobster movies and listens to a lot of podcast bros. He's feeling himself so much that he almost sounds like a certain redacted individual. But one thing I can say I actually respect about Jodio is that he's only 15 and already tired of chasing the bag, and he's letting it chase him instead. He says his mechanism is a universal constant that makes fat stacks of money flow straight to him. Even though he pretty much guarantees us that he's getting rich in this story, his mechanism speech makes him sound a little naive and gullible, which he kind of is, and we see that in chapter 2. Sure, he's been in the game for a while, so he's street smart and can tell when something isn't right, but not trusting his gut gets him kicked in the ass early on, like when he's tricked by this narc exactly like Badger in Breaking Bad.
Albuquerque police, you're under arrest, get on the ground!
He does manage to get out of it pretty quickly by using his stand to get rid of the evidence though. Right after this, he talks a little bit about his personality. He did a psych evaluation at his school, and he presents the symptoms of someone who has antisocial personality disorder. Part of me really wants to use my psych degree for once and talk about this in depth, but you all don't care. And I'm not going to be that guy right now. For too long. Finding out he has antisocial really gets to him, and all he does is reassure his mom that he'll be careful. This might seem like a weird thing for him to say, but just like with any other mental illness, there's a lot of stigma surrounding antisocial, and most people don't know anything about it, or how someone with it can live a functional life. Jodio is worried about whether or not he can be happy, but we've already seen him laughing and joking early on in the chapter, and even though he's not interested in making friends and has no problem beating the goofy out of those cops, it wasn't exactly unprovoked, and he has things that he likes doing, like making sure his mom's life is as easy as possible. I'd imagine this is part of the reason that he's so willing to be in on the heist to begin with, even though he lets his seniors make the decision. I'm excited to see how the story plays out being centered around such an interesting character. All of the previous JoJos have much more serious motivations for starting their adventures, but right now his is literally just money, and honestly, it's kind of a vibe. So what are your hopes for part 9? I really want to see the crew pull off more and more heists. My guess is that it's probably going to be like this for a while, because nobody really has a fighting stand other than Jodio. Hop in the comments and let's discuss.